This is the town of Ramsgate Public House, situated in the district of Wapping, East London. To the rear of this 16th century building is a set of stone steps, known as the Wapping Old Stairs, which lead down to the north shore of the River Thames. At around 4:30 p.m. on Sunday, February 20th, 1966, 15-year-old Diane Hamilton was in the kitchen of the town of Ramsgate Tavern. Her father, Harry Hamilton, was the landlord. As she washed her hands in the sink and looked out of the window across the Thames, she was distracted by a man, thin in stature, opening the gate to the steps. She watched as he descended them towards the river, which was now at low tide. He was dressed in a light grey shabby suit and stood at the shore expectantly. Diane Hamilton was surprised to see a stranger here at 4:30 p.m. on a Sunday. She knew all of the regular boatmen in the area, but didn't recognise this person. She thought no more of it though, and went about her business. Little more than 1 hour later, a boatman on the Thames found a fleshy mass resting on the sodden ground, close to the foot of the steps. On closer inspection, he recognised it as the upper section of a female torso. The head and arms, including the shoulders, had been severed off cleanly. The immediate theory was that the woman had been involved in a boating accident and was cut to pieces by the boat's propeller. After this was eventually ruled out, it dawned on London's police force that this could be the 7th victim of Jack the Stripper. If you're familiar with my channel, you may remember that back in June of 2018, I covered the Hammersmith nude murders case. 6 known victims were claimed between 1964 and 1965 by a killer who was never apprehended. The final known victim, Bridget O'Hara, was found in February of 1965. The state of the body in this case did not match those in the nude murders, but Chief Superintendent John Durose, who had headed the nude murders investigation, surmised that it could have been the same killer, and the act of cutting off the head and arms may have been to delay or prevent identification of the body. On Wednesday, February 23rd, 1966, John Durose joined Detective Superintendent Jack Mannings at a post-mortem which took place at the Poplar Mortuary in East London. The 10-inch section of chest belonged to a woman said to be between 30 and 40 years of age, with dark hair, a 40 to 42-inch bust, and a 34-inch waist. She was estimated to be 5'6", and she had given birth to at least one child. This section was cut from the base of the neck to just above the navel, with a very sharp blade and surgical precision. According to the pathologist, the woman did not die of natural causes before dismemberment. She had certainly been murdered. There was no clothing found, the body part had been in the water for no longer than 4 hours, and death had occurred within 48 hours of it being found. Because the head and arms had been expertly severed, Scotland Yard were almost certainly looking for someone with a knowledge of precision cutting, like a surgeon or butcher. It was eventually decided that the victim was unlikely to be the 7th victim of Jack the Stripper, as there was, ultimately, nothing to link her to the other victims, other than the fact she was found in the Thames. The MOs were just too different. John Durose had little more to do with the investigation, and Detective Superintendent James Graney was left with the unenviable task of identifying a section of corpse with no means of identification and catching a killer with no current leads. It was also impossible to say whether the torso had been dropped into the river at the point it was found, or if it had been discarded elsewhere upstream. On Monday, February 21st, the investigation was made public when the story hit the papers. BBC Radio broadcast details of the find that evening and made an appeal to the public for help. Within an hour of the broadcast, 5 women were reported missing to Scotland Yard. These women hadn't been seen for days, but concerns for their safety were not aroused until the broadcast was made. A further 5 were reported missing in the following 24 hours, and the February 24th issue of the Police Gazette requested information on any women from around the country who had gone missing in the last few weeks, because of course there was no guarantee that the victim was a Londoner. On February 22nd at dawn, 300 police and frogmen made a sweep of both sides of the Thames from Westminster Bridge to the estuary, then extended their search west as far as Teddington in the hope of finding more body parts. On the same day, the section of torso was taken to the London hospital for a more detailed examination by pathologists Dr. Hugh Johnson and Dr. Eric Cameron. A vague impression of printed lettering was found on the skin. It was now thought that the part may have been left to rest on a cardboard box or wrapped in newspaper before being discarded. The faint impressions of the letters Y and E were made out on the front of the body. When the body part was taken to a Cardiff laboratory for further examination using infrared light, the letters K, E and Y were recognised. They were found to have come from the Observer newspaper dated February 13th and had been part of the headline, "Separation from Mother Can Make Monkey Neurotic." In earnest, the police made visits to every house in Wapping to which the Observer was delivered, but no suspects were found. On Friday, March the 4th, 2 weeks after the grim discovery at Wapping, another section of torso was seen floating in the Thames at Greenhithe, close to the Nautical College. It's worth mentioning that other reports say it was found in Northfleet, which is 2 miles east of Greenhithe. Either way, the body was discovered by workmen on the shore, who noticed it floating between 2 barges. This section had been cut and sawn in the same way as the previous section, and it ran from the navel to the upper thigh. Its location was approximately 20 miles downstream from where the first section was found. Later, at the London Hospital in Whitechapel, pathologists confirmed that the 2 sections came from the same body. 100 more police officers and 10 dogs were now drafted into searching the Wapping area where the original section was found. House-to-house inquiries were also made for miles outside of Wapping, and all empty and abandoned buildings were searched. London's old bomb sites and wasteland were also investigated to no avail. Scotland Yard believed at this point that the killer was keeping the sections of body and discarding of them a piece at a time. 100 more police made a further search of the shore where the second find was made, but no clues were found. Then, on Monday, March the 7th, at a dock in Rainham, a workman stumbled across a section of thigh, about 10 inches long. Pathologists examining the first 2 finds again concluded that it belonged to the same person. The following day, March the 8th, the river revealed a small cut-off of human flesh, which was found at Grays, 8 miles southeast of Rainham. But this was just a preview of what the Grays region of the river was hiding. 4 days later, on Saturday, March the 12th, as police from Kent and Essex joined forces with London's murder squad, Detective Superintendent James Graney received a call from a labourer who had been working on a construction site at the same foreshore at Grays. The unnamed man had found another body part. This was a narrower section of torso, which included part of the neck and shoulders. James Graney went to the site and arranged for it to be transported by car to the London hospital for analysis, where again it was confirmed to belong to the same woman. Police presence at the north foreshore of the Thames east side was dying down as March 17th approached. Had they stuck around a bit longer, they may have been the ones to find the putrid, waterlogged human leg floating around a dock in Dagenham. But again it was the dock's workmen who made the grim find. At first, due to the amount of time it had been in the water, it was hard to distinguish whether it was human or part of an animal. But inspection found it not only belonged to a human, but the same human. The only match that was made public was on Friday, March 18th, when police at Wapping received an anonymous tip-off regarding 31-year-old Brenda Harris. Mrs. Harris left her home near Reading after a family argument, which was 3 weeks before the first torso find. Her mother showed police a letter, postmarked Blackheath, London, that she said the family had received from Brenda in late February. It said that she was safe and well, but her younger brother, Geoffrey, was certain that the letter was not written by Brenda. He said that he knew her handwriting well and it didn't match the letter. Clearly concerned, Brenda's family jumped to the conclusion that she was the woman in question. Her brother said, "I think it could be my sister. I've got an awful feeling." Brenda's husband Alan's response depended on what newspaper you read. The Newcastle Evening Chronicle was among those who quoted him as simply saying, "I can't believe my wife is dead." But the Evening Express cleared up any confusion, correctly quoting him as saying, "I don't believe my wife is dead. I'm sure she will contact her mother before Sunday." He was referring to Mother's Day, which was on March the 20th. However, there were a couple of glaring differences between Brenda Harris and the unidentified woman. Brenda was small in stature, whereas the section of torso was described by police as belonging to, quote, "a beefy and well-built woman, thought to be much taller than Mrs. Harris." Secondly, Mrs. Harris had undergone 3 caesarean births. At the time, this was thought by the family to be important, but there was no mention by police of the mystery woman having any signs of such scarring. By April 12th, however, it was reported that Mrs. Brenda Harris had returned home safe and well. A schoolboy who approached police at the riverside told them that he'd seen, quote, "a man about 7 feet high get out of his car and throw a large package into the Thames at the Victoria embankment." This sparked a frogman's search of the area, but no further clues were found. After receiving an anonymous call on March the 7th, Scotland Yard headed to Epping Forest. They received word that a human head had been found in a lido there. After frogmen searched the lido, no head was found, and it was strongly believed that the report was bogus. On Saturday, March the 5th, an abandoned dinghy, which appeared to be forcibly jammed beneath a jetty, only 20 yards away from where the second piece of torso was found, was first thought to be a credible lead. The blue and white craft, which was the kind not usually seen in the Thames, had a sunset motif on the rear. It was later found to have no link to the case. There was also a report that on Sunday, February the 19th, the day before the first find, a red minicar pulled up beside the Westminster embankment, and the occupants, a group of men, were seen throwing a heavy-looking tied-up object into the river. This tip-off was of particular interest because 9 men, who all lived alone, were reported missing from their homes in the Wapping area during the investigation. Only one of them was found and questioned on March the 6th. He was later released after it was decided that he had no involvement in the case and had no information to give. A curious case arose on Wednesday, March 2nd, when an unnamed man from, quote, "the north of England," made a phone call to his local police station stating that he knew the woman and could identify her. The man's name and exact location was withheld, but it was later found that a woman matching the description of the torso woman went missing from Liverpool in February of '66. This may sound like a tedious link, as people go missing all the time up and down the country, but could the mystery man from the north of England have been referring to the Liverpool woman? Furthermore, did he know for certain that she was the Thames woman, and was he in fact the killer? No more information was revealed. I'm afraid to say, my friends, that this is where the case of the torso in the Thames goes cold. The last words I could find on the story were from issues of the Birmingham Post and Daily Mirror, both dated May the 11th, 1966. They tell of the inquest, which was held in St Pancras on May the 10th. At the inquest, it was explained that of the 250 women James Graney had investigated, 17 were possible matches. But with no way of narrowing the list down any further, an open verdict was recorded by coroner Ian Milne. It's also acknowledged that the dead woman may not have been reported missing in the first place, meaning that the 17 remaining women were completely speculative candidates anyway. The cause of death was not determined, and there were no clues other than the expert method used to dismember the body and the newspaper ink found on the skin. But neither of those things drew the police any closer to their killer. The most likely candidate was the mystery thin man in the shabby grey suit, witnessed by 15-year-old Diane Hamilton on the day of the first discovery. But he walked away that day, never to be heard from again. James Graney made his final plea to the public in May of 1966. Of course, the victim may not have been reported missing, but someone somewhere must know her. We ask anyone who knows of any woman missing to tell the police. A human skull found in the Thames at Greenhithe, Kent on July 23rd, 1966 was initially thought to belong to the Torso murder victim, especially as it was found so close to where the second portion of Torso was found almost 5 months before. But after examination, it was revealed that the skull had been there for at least 3 years. I could find no further information on the skull's identity. Although this particular story ends here, other similar incidents have occurred over the years. In fact, the River Thames holds a number of dark tales involving the discovery of human torsos. 70 years before the 1966 case, there was the famous Thames Torso murders, in which the torsos and other body parts from 4 victims were found floating or washed up. This case spanned from 1887 to 1889. Only 1 victim was identified. The killer or killers were never brought to justice. The case was well overshadowed by Jack the Ripper's killing spree, and some even believed, despite the clear differences in method, that Jack the Ripper himself may have been responsible. The case is covered at length by author M.J. Troe in his 2011 book, The Thames Torso Murders. On October 5, 1974, the torso of criminal Billy Moseley was washed up on the shore of the Thames. Other parts of his body washed up over the next 10 days, in what turned out to be a gangland killing. At around the same time, the body of Mickey Cornwall was found in woodland near Hatfield, 30 miles north of central London. The 2 murders were linked, and 4 people were charged for their roles in the killings. It was to be one of the most controversial miscarriages of justice ever seen in Britain. The case was covered in the 1992 Channel 4 documentary The Torso Murders, but as the story carried on well into the late 90s, it was only told in part. You may already be familiar with the story of Adam, the name given to the unknown African boy whose torso was found floating in the River Thames on September 21, 2001. It's generally believed that he'd been the victim of a ritualistic sacrifice. If you've never heard of it and want to learn more, take a look at Channel 4's documentary, Torso in the Thames, Adam's Story.